What if I told you that America's spy thrillers of the 1960s were darker, sharper, and in many ways riskier than the British Bond juggernaut? Everyone remembers shaken martinis and tuxedos, but buried under the glitz are American-made stories of paranoia, betrayal, and double crosses that cut closer to real Cold War nerves. Ever wonder what the United States was secretly projecting on its own silver screens? Let's rewind the reels and uncover the thriller's history forgot. The Manchurian Candidate 1962. Imagine a film so ahead of its time that Washington insiders whispered it felt less like fiction and more like prophecy. The Manchurian Candidate takes Cold War paranoia and straps it directly into your nervous system. Frank Sinatra plays Major Bennett Marco, a soldier plagued by nightmares after his Korean War capture. His unit star, Raymond Shaw, returns home as a war hero. But here's the twist. Shaw isn't a hero. He's a brainwashed assassin, programmed to strike at the heart of American politics. Director John Frankenheimer doesn't just tell a spy story. He redefines what a political thriller can be. The hypnosis sequences, shot with dizzying camera movements, drop the audience straight into a trance alongside the characters. Angela Lansbury delivers a chilling turn as Shaw's manipulative mother, a performance so commanding it still shocks viewers today. This wasn't James Bond waltzing through glamorous casinos. This was espionage as psychological warfare. What made the film infamous was its timing. Released a year before President Kennedy's assassination, audiences were rattled by its depiction of political murder. United Artists actually pulled the film from circulation for years, fearing its content was too disturbing in a country still grieving. By the time it resurfaced in the late 1980s, critics hailed it as a lost masterpiece of paranoia cinema. Here's the real kicker. The Manchurian Candidate didn't rely on gadgets or gimmicks. It weaponized fear itself, making you question whether the smiling patriot in front of you might be carrying a hidden command to destroy everything. If that doesn't define a forgotten American spy classic, nothing does. The Prize, 1963. Picture this. Stockholm, Nobel Prize season. Tuxedos and gowns flowing through the corridors of elegance. Into this refined world walks Paul Newman. Not as a dignified laureate, but as Andrew Craig, a novelist who drinks too much and believes trouble is around every corner. And he's right. The prize uses the glitz of a global awards ceremony as camouflage for Cold War intrigue, and it works brilliantly. The setup is deceptively classy. Scientists and writers gather to be honored, but beneath the champagne toasts simmers a spy plot involving defecting scientists and shadowy forces trying to silence them. Newman, playing against type, stumbles into the conspiracy not because he's trained, but because he's too stubborn to ignore what he sees. That stubbornness gets him nearly killed multiple times, in sequences staged with Hitchcock-like flair. One of the film's clever tricks is using Stockholm itself as a character. The wide boulevards, frozen waterways, and ornate hotels all become backdrops for danger. A chase through the city streets turns dignified Nobel proceedings into a chaotic battlefield. Unlike Bond's cool efficiency, Newman's Craig improvises with sheer survival instinct, turning mishaps into escapes. Though MGM marketed it as a romantic thriller, critics noted how it disguised genuine spy tension under its polished surface. It didn't make Bond-level box office, and over time it slipped into the shadows. Yet, its combination of literary pretension and Cold War paranoia makes it a standout. The prize reminds us that espionage doesn't always unfold in smoky back alleys. Sometimes it crashes the banquet, slips into the awards ceremony, and reminds you that even geniuses aren't safe from shadow games. 36 Hours, 1964. What if someone convinced you that decades had passed and the war you fought in was ancient history? Only it was all a lie designed to extract your secrets. That's the premise of 36 Hours, a high-concept espionage thriller starring James Garner as American intelligence officer Jefferson Pike. The story begins in 1944, days before the D-Day invasion. Pike is drugged and kidnapped by German agents who stage an elaborate hoax. He wakes up in what appears to be 1950, told the war ended years ago, and that he's suffering from memory gaps. A team of German doctors, led by Rod Taylor, carefully manipulate him into recalling Allied invasion plans. The clock is ticking, He has just 36 hours before he realizes the truth. The brilliance lies in the setup. The Germans create an environment so convincing, from fake newspapers to aged makeup on his supposed colleagues, that Pike himself questions his sanity. This wasn't just cloak and dagger action. It was espionage through psychological manipulation, and audiences in the 1960s found it terrifyingly plausible. Director George Seaton stretches tension with surgical precision. Scenes of Pike testing his reality, checking the freshness of flowers, noticing slight accents, become moments of nerve-rattling suspense. The escape, when it comes, is less about gunfire and more about wits outsmarting deception. While 36 Hours wasn't a massive box office juggernaut, it developed a cult following for its audacity. Today it plays like a missing puzzle piece between The Manchurian Candidate and later mind-bending thrillers like The Game. Forgotten by many, it remains one of the smartest espionage films of its era. 7 Days in May 1964. Now, imagine this. America teetering not because of foreign spies, but from its own military brass plotting a coup. That's 7 Days in May, a film so politically charged that President Kennedy himself encouraged its production. Before his death, the plot follows Kirk Douglas as a Marine colonel who discovers a chilling conspiracy. His superior, played with icy authority by Burt Lancaster, is planning to overthrow the U.S. government. Why? To stop what he believes is a weak president's arms treaty with the Soviets. The film strips away glamour and focuses on the mechanics of betrayal, coded messages, and late-night secret meetings. Director John Frankenheimer, who had just shaken audiences with The Manchurian Candidate, once again digs deep into America's Cold War anxieties. This time, the enemy isn't hidden in brainwashed soldiers, but inside the Pentagon itself. The black and white cinematography adds a documentary-like seriousness, as though we're peeking into classified government files. The dialogue crackles with urgency, and Lancaster's performance oozes conviction. He doesn't play a mustache-twirling villain. He plays a patriot so convinced of his righteousness that he becomes dangerous. That's what makes it terrifying. It feels real. Douglas, meanwhile, grounds the film with moral struggle, caught between loyalty to his general and loyalty to democracy. Although 7 Days in May scored critical praise, its grim tone kept it from mainstream popularity. Audiences drawn to Bond's fantasy found its realism unnerving. Yet decades later, it feels eerily relevant. Military overreach, political deception, questions of loyalty sound familiar. This is American spy cinema at its most sobering, a thriller that dared to point the lens inward. The Spy with My Face, 1965. By the mid-60s, espionage fever was so strong that even television heroes demanded big-screen adventures. Enter The Spy with My Face, spun from the hit series The Man from U.N.C.L.E. While Bond strutted in tuxedos, Robert Vaughn's Napoleon Solo offered audiences an American counterpoint, slick, clever, and cool under pressure. The film expands on an episode of the series, upgrading it with bigger sets, higher stakes, and Technicolor flair. The hook? A villainous organization called Thrush Kidnaps Solo, and replaces him with a surgically altered double. Suddenly, the line between hero and imposter blurs. And the mission isn't just saving the world, it's proving who the real agent is. What makes it fascinating is how it reflects the anxieties of its era. Identity theft wasn't about credit cards in 1965. It was about Cold War fears of infiltration. If the enemy could become you, how could anyone be trusted? Vaughn balances charm with unease, while David McCallum's Ilya Kuryakin grounds the action with icy precision. Though largely dismissed by critics as Bond-light, the film struck a chord with fans of the show, pulling in respectable box office and paving the way for more U.N.C.L.E. theatrical releases. Over time, it slipped into obscurity, overshadowed by both the Bond machine and the campier Matt Helm films. But here's the thing. The Spy with My Face captures the moment when American television tried to muscle into cinema's biggest craze. It's less about gadgets and more about the unnerving idea that someone could steal your life, and no one would notice until it was too late. That paranoia, wrapped in glossy Cold War packaging, makes it a forgotten gem worth unsealing. The Satan Bug, 1965. Forget rockets and nuclear bombs. What if the deadliest weapon of the Cold War was invisible, airborne, and microscopic? The Satan Bug dives straight into that nightmare. George Maharis stars as a former intelligence agent recruited when a top-secret lab is raided. The thieves don't steal files or jewels. They steal a virus so potent it could wipe out humanity in weeks. Suddenly, espionage isn't about borders. It's about survival of the species. Director John Sturges, known for epics like The Magnificent Seven, flips his widescreen grandeur into claustrophobic paranoia. Government corridors, deserted labs, and sun-baked deserts all become battlegrounds for control of the invisible. Instead of glamorous car chases, we get tense standoffs where a single vial threatens global extinction. The real suspense isn't whether the agent can outshoot the enemy, it's whether he can outthink them before that glass shatters. What's eerie is how prophetic it feels today. A biological weapon, carried by radicals who don't care about borders or treaties, was a terrifyingly modern concept in 1965. Audiences expecting lighthearted spy antics were instead hit with hard science, military bureaucracy, and the fragility of modern life. Though it didn't become a blockbuster, The Satan Bug carved a place as one of the most unsettling what-if thrillers of its decade. It sidestepped Bond's fantasies and asked a darker question. If science can save humanity, how easily could it also destroy it? That thought alone makes it unforgettable and deeply chilling. The Silencers, 1966. Dean Martin. Yes, you read that right. America's king of cool, cocktail glass in hand, became the face of one of the strangest spy series of the 1960s. The Silencers introduced audiences to Matt Helm, a womanizing, wisecracking secret agent who was more Rat Pack than MI6. But while critics dismissed it as a spoof, it was actually a clever window into how America processed espionage culture. Based on Donald Hamilton's novels, the film follows Helm as he squares off against an organization plotting nuclear chaos. But don't expect shadowy noir. Instead, think bright Technicolor sets, outrageous gadgets, and a tone that veers from deadly serious to tongue-in-cheek in seconds. One moment, Dean Martin is casually dispatching villains. The next, he's crooning lines with a smirk. Behind the jokes was a shrewd marketing move. Bond was dominating, and Hollywood needed an American answer. The result was less about beating Bond at his own game, and more about parodying him before parodies were even a thing. Audiences loved it. The Silencers made enough money to spawn 3 sequels. Here's the kicker. Beneath its camp, the film captures Cold War nerves. Plots about nuclear blackmail weren't funny in 1966. They were terrifying. Helm just happened to deliver them with a wink and a martini. Today, it feels like a time capsule of American pop culture colliding with geopolitical anxiety, a spy thriller wrapped in comedy, and yet another reminder that espionage stories come in more flavors than tuxedos and Aston Martins. Our Man Flint, 1966. If James Bond was polished steel, Derek Flint was neon chrome. James Coburn's Our Man Flint is often remembered as satire, but look closer and you'll see a film that deliberately reinvented the spy hero for American audiences. Flint isn't a government pawn, he's a polymath, a genius who speaks dozens of languages, disables missiles with a flick of his lighter, and makes Bond look like an amateur. The plot is bonkers in the best way. A group of scientists convinced they can control world weather, create chaos to force governments into submission. Flint, reluctant but irresistible, gets pulled back into duty. What follows is a globe-trotting ride full of futuristic gadgets, absurd action sequences, and Coburn's effortless swagger. Director Daniel Mann plays the whole thing with a straight face, which is why it works. Flint's world is surreal, but the stakes are high, and Coburn, he nails it. His performance walks the line between parody and sincerity, making Flint more than a cartoon. He's America's ultimate spy fantasy, freewheeling, brilliant, and entirely unbothered by bureaucracy. Our Man Flint wasn't just a hit. It became a pop culture staple. It spawned a sequel, inspired comic books, and later influenced Austin Powers and countless other spoofs. Yet today, it sits in Bond's long shadow, often forgotten as more than just parody. But don't be fooled. Our man Flint was America's declaration that it could play the spy game too, just louder, flashier, and with a grin. The Venetian Affair, 1966. Picture Robert Vaughn, still glowing from the man from U.N.C.L.E., suddenly dropped into Venice's canals for a conspiracy dripping with Cold War paranoia. The Venetian Affair isn't glossy satire. It's bleak, moody, and steeped in betrayal. Vaughn plays Bill Fenner, a former CIA agent-turned-journalist, drawn into an investigation after a suicide bombing wipes out diplomats. The deeper he digs, the more he uncovers about espionage networks spreading across Europe. Unlike the colorful Helm or Flint movies, The Venetian Affair takes its cues from The Manchurian Candidate. It's a film of whispered conversations, suspicious glances, and moral exhaustion. Vaughn plays Fenner not as a suave operative, but as a weary man who knows how ugly this business gets. The Venetian backdrop adds a haunting layer. Palaces and canals become corridors of suspicion, where beauty masks corruption. The film was shot on location, giving it an authenticity that Hollywood backlots couldn't replicate. Every gondola ride, every crumbling stone wall feels like it's hiding secrets. And while it lacked box office firepower, critics praised its serious tone, noting how it stripped espionage of glamour and replaced it with despair. Today, The Venetian Affair feels like a lost artifact of American spy cinema, a reminder that not every spy story needed explosions. Some needed only shadows, whispers, and a man realizing that trust itself is the deadliest gamble. The Quiller Memorandum, 1966. Set in post-war Berlin, the Quiller Memorandum walks straight into the minefield of Cold War espionage. George Siegel stars as Quiller, an American sent to investigate a neo-Nazi organization trying to claw back power. But unlike most thrillers of the era, Quiller isn't a superhero. He's underprepared, often manipulated, and constantly reminded that in espionage, you're never really in control. Director Michael Anderson dials down spectacle in favor of mood. Empty Berlin streets feel haunted by history, and each interaction brims with menace. Alec Guinness appears as Quiller's British handler, dispensing cryptic instructions with unsettling calm. The true showstopper, though, is Max von Sydow as October, the chilling villain whose polite menace makes every scene vibrate with tension. The film's power lies in its realism. Quiller doesn't save the world with gadgets. He barely survives through wit and resilience. The famous interrogation sequence, where he's psychologically dismantled by October's team, is a masterclass in slow-burn suspense. By the time he staggers free, the audience feels as bruised as he does. While the film earned a BAFTA for its screenplay, American audiences largely overlooked it, preferring flashier entries of the decade. Over time, it slipped into obscurity, unfairly overshadowed by both Bond and Coburn's Flint. But cinephiles recognize it as a standout for daring to show the spy not as invincible, but as breakable. In short, The Quiller Memorandum is a spy thriller that bleeds honesty. It's not about fantasy. It's about survival in a world where ideology and brutality mix in every handshake. The Double Man, 1967. What if the spy you trusted most was replaced by his exact double? That's the unnerving hook of The Double Man, starring Yul Brynner in one of his most underrated roles. Brynner plays Dan Slater, a tough CIA agent called to Austria after his son's suspicious death. But what starts as a family tragedy quickly spirals into espionage horror when Soviet operatives engineer a plan to replace Slater with a look-alike under their control. The film thrives on tension rather than spectacle. The snowbound Austrian Alps become a stage for paranoia, their quiet beauty masking an invisible chess game of deception. Brynner's dual performance, one as the real Slater, the other as his manipulated doppelganger, gives the movie a psychological edge. Watching him play both hunter and hunted is like seeing two wolves circling each other in the same body. Director Franklin Schaffner, who later made Patton in Planet of the Apes, delivers an early glimpse of his skill with identity and power struggles. What's remarkable is how The Double Man avoids flashy gadgetry. Instead, it leans into dread, the idea that your enemy doesn't need to kill you if they can simply become you. Critics at the time dismissed it as too grim, especially compared to the campy spy hits of the era. But today, that grimness feels like a strength. It's a story less about saving the world and more about how fragile trust can be in the shadow of Cold War espionage. If Bond was fantasy, The Double Man was nightmare fuel. The Ambushers, 1967. If the Silencers launched Matt Helm as America's cheeky spy, the Ambushers doubled down on the absurdity. Dean Martin once again slides into Helm's shoes, or perhaps slippers, given his laid-back style, and the result is part spoof, part thriller, and part pure time capsule of 1960s culture. The plot? Helm investigates a hijacked experimental flying saucer weapon. Yes, a flying saucer. It sounds ridiculous, but that was the point. The Cold War had audiences jittery about space, science, and superweapons. And the Ambushers twisted those fears into pulp entertainment. Director Henry Levin bathes the film in vibrant colors, over-the-top sets, and tongue-in-cheek dialogue. Martin, famously relaxed on set, played Helm as if the entire world was one big cocktail lounge, even when bullets were flying. But beneath the camp was still the skeleton of a spy thriller, secret weapons, hidden bases, and sinister plots to destabilize the globe. The film made money, but critics rolled their eyes, branding it a lazy Bond imitation. Yet, in hindsight, The Ambushers is fascinating. It shows how America embraced espionage not just as deadly serious business, but as pop spectacle. It's a Cold War comic strip, projected in Technicolor, reflecting how paranoia and playfulness often coexisted in the 60s. Forgotten now, it survives as a quirky entry in the spy canon, reminding us that even the silliest thrillers were shaped by very real fears of global destruction. The Chairman, 1969. Gregory Peck, usually the face of noble integrity, takes a sharp turn into espionage in The Chairman. Here, he plays Dr. John Hathaway, a scientist recruited by U.S. intelligence for a mission that mixes brains with deadly stakes. His target? Red China, where a brilliant scientist has created a food enzyme that could feed millions or be turned into a weapon of control. What makes it gripping is the gadget lodged in Peck's skull, a transmitter that beams back his conversations and, if necessary, can trigger his death. Imagine walking into enemy territory with a literal kill switch in your brain. The tension is baked into every step Hathaway takes across China's tightly surveilled landscapes. Peck brings gravitas, balancing vulnerability with determination. Unlike Bond, Hathaway isn't a trained assassin. He's an academic dragged into a world of shadows, forced to adapt quickly or die. That contrast, scholar versus spy, gives the film a distinct flavor. Director J. Lee Thompson crafts taut suspense sequences, from covert meetings to a nail-biting chase across the countryside. The film also dips into political commentary, exploring how science can be twisted into both salvation and domination. Though it didn't land as a major hit, The Chairman remains a gem of Cold War cinema. It's less glamorous but far more haunting, with the image of Peck's character knowing he's one wrong move away from both capture and instant death. It's espionage stripped of fantasy, leaving only dread. Ice Station, Zebra 1968. Cold, claustrophobic, and unrelentingly tense, Ice Station Zebra was MGM's answer to the spy thriller on an epic scale. Starring Rock Hudson, Patrick McGoohan, and Ernest Borgnine, it's a story of espionage played out in the frozen Arctic, where survival is as treacherous as the mission itself. Hudson plays Commander Faraday, tasked with leading a submarine mission to rescue a British weather station. But of course, nothing is that simple. A satellite-carrying classified film has crashed near the outpost, and both Americans and Soviets want it. As the sub pushes north, sabotage, betrayal, and shifting loyalties turn the icy waters into a battleground. Director John Sturges turns the submarine into a pressure cooker. Every creak of metal, every icy draft feels like doom closing in. The Arctic sequences, shot with sweeping grandeur, contrast beautifully with the cramped sub interiors, highlighting the fragile line between mission success and catastrophe. Audiences in 1968 were dazzled by its scope. It became a roadshow release, complete with reserved seating and overtures. While it never reached Bond's popularity, it carved a cult following, especially among submarine drama fans. The The set design even influenced later submarine classics like The Hunt for Red October. Ice Station Zebra proves that American spy thrillers didn't need martinis or casinos. Sometimes all they needed was a frozen wasteland, a steel coffin under the sea, and the knowledge that one wrong move could trigger a world war. The Secret War of Harry Frigg, 1968. Who says spy thrillers can't be funny? Paul Newman proves otherwise in The Secret War of Harry Frigg, a lighter, satirical twist on espionage. Newman plays a low-ranking soldier with a knack for escaping military prisons. His skill catches the eye of Allied command, who send him on a mission. Infiltrate a prison holding 5 Allied generals and help them escape. The setup is ripe for comedy, but don't be fooled, it's still spy territory. Frigg must pose as a high-ranking officer, outwit his captors, and juggle an identity that could collapse at any moment. Newman, brimming with charm, makes Harry both exasperating and lovable. He's not a polished spy, he's a reluctant one, fumbling through chaos with sheer wit and guts. The European setting adds flair, with castles, cellars, and secret passages giving the film an old-world espionage feel. Director Jack Smite balances humor with genuine suspense, especially as Frigg's ruse grows riskier by the minute. Though it wasn't a major hit, The Secret War of Harry Frigg showed a different side of American spy thrillers, one where levity and danger coexisted. It wasn't parody like Dean Martin's Matt Helm movies, nor was it grim like The Double Man. It was somewhere in between, a sly wink at the spy genre while still delivering tension. Forgotten now, it deserves rediscovery if only for Newman's effortless performance, turning espionage into a game of wit rather than bullets. It's proof that in the 60s, American spy cinema wasn't afraid to experiment with tone. And there you have it, 15 American spy thrillers from the 1960s that history nearly buried. Some were chilling, some campy, some grand, and some sly, but all carried the pulse of a country wrestling with Cold War paranoia. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your pick in the comments and let's debate the forgotten gems of espionage cinema. Hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and remember, the spy game never really ends. It just changes faces.